I started to tell the truth about what I knew. And I remember one talk that I gave, and a man at the back said to me, you know, Brian, you've described all of this stuff. What do these people want to do? And the answer I gave was they want to kill us. And there was this stunning silence in the room. And then a couple of people said to me, do you really mean that? And I said, I mean it absolutely. And from that moment on, not only did the conversation in the room change, so it lost its sort of flippant, casual attitude and it started to become serious, but it taught me something, and I kept going with giving people information and using the right words. Because one of the worst things that's been done to us is political correctness, which is incredibly dangerous. It's not nonsense, which some people talk about. Political correctness is control of our language, and if our language is controlled, the way we think is controlled. And it is amazing what has started to happen now that people are actually using the right language in relation to what we're fighting. So we're finally beginning, for example, to hear members of Parliament and judges described as criminal. We are hearing people freely talking about Blair or Brown or Cameron being war criminals. It's just they need to be brought in front of the courts. So the moment we use the right language, we're doing something very powerful to regain our territory. That we, in the broadest sense, and that's everybody that's out there doing something, one of the things they must do is start using the real language. These people, what do they want to do? They want to kill us. It's all in the documentation. If you choose the basic bit of reducing world population to 500 million, that means there's a big problem for most of us. But I think one phrase really captures what they're trying to do, and that is reduce the carbon footprint. Because it was Mike Robinson from UK Column who said to me quietly one day, he said, you know, Brian, I think that the carbon footprint is us, is mankind. And I think this is absolutely what it is. We are carbon. We breathe it, we produce it. And now we've got somebody saying...
We're carbon-based life forms, you're right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've now got somebody saying we want to get rid of the carbon footprint. They're saying that actually they want to murder us. That's the correct word. And I consistently find with audiences that if you use the right language, you might get somebody who scoffs and walks out, but the rest of them start to pay attention to what you're talking about. They may be quiet because you've actually got them a bit frightened, but we need to do this with some people to get them motivated.
But the thing is, getting back to political correctness and what you can say and what you cannot say. Now, you got to look into the Frankfurt School to understand who was behind it. The Frankfurt School was a university they set up in Germany. It's appeared, and people get very confused with this term communism, because it's been so misdiagnosed in so many places. It's got many fronts as well. Even the people who are ardent followers of it on the low levels have no idea of what it really is. But the Frankfurt School was set up, they ran out of Germany when Hitler came in, and they went to the United States and Britain. And these guys were specialists using psychology, which tells me again the depth of national and people's psychology that they understood. It was way beyond Freudian terms. This is very old science, obviously. But their job was to examine the cultures of each nation and simply adjust the perception of each nation to accept this same agenda of globalism with an elite, an intellectual elite running the whole show and getting the public to accept it. And they would do that by looking at each culture and then taking over the culture industry within each nation. And this is all documented stuff if you look up Frankfurt School. And a slightly different one for the US. Britain, again, a slightly different one for them. And they ran the BBC, by the way. They still do. And at one time you couldn't get into the BBC for a job on any position unless you came from Eton. And in the 1960s, the Royal Institute of International Affairs and the Council on Foreign Relations from the States and all the other branches from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India even, met in London. It was mainstream. And they were talking about bringing in a global culture in about 1964. And that's what the meeting was all about. And their big problem was, would they use Britain to spearhead the cultural change? Or would they use the United States and Hollywood and their massive programs? It took them 2 weeks to decide that they would use American culture, which was their culture, by the way. It's not American at all. Everything in America has been given by the same Bernard-type characters that worked with these institutions and the Frankfurt School. Now, Theo Adorno was one of the biggest players. Very interesting man, an utter contemptuous elitist, because he actually said that very few people would have the intellect to understand his writings in his own book. You know, he took over the culture industry mainly for Britain. He financed a lot of the groups that broke through in the 60s to the top. He also was pretty well a genius in music. That was a sideline of his. Great friend of the Queen. Friendly with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And he did definitely write a lot of the stuff for the top groups in Britain as they came out with the raging 60s and the sexual liberation and all that stuff. Just do it in the road like the Beatles song, all that stuff. And the drugs came in at the same time. So much sacks of drugs were thrown over university walls for free by limos just passing by, you know, get the whole thing kicked off. Every culture has had its head spun around by the culture industry. Now, Theo Adorno says we must degrade each culture, degrade them, until they have no past to look back on. It says we must degrade them and down through all the sexual immorality we can cause. It says including we'll know when we've achieved our goal when we get necrophilia as the norm. So here you have a bunch of people who work with another group called the Macy Group. Bertrand Russell was part of both of them, and a lot of other big players. Lord Bertrand Russell, who would use a form of socialism to guide this through. And you would understand what they mean by socialism. Socialism to them is the scientific domination of all society to reshape the world, to remake all that was left imperfect and make it perfect. That's what they say at their meetings. And they're talking about us. We're a natural elite. They claim they're the natural elite and intelligentsia should rule our lives in a proper function. It's just too scattered right now. It's just all dysfunctional. In other words, totally controlled society is what they mean by correcting society. Now, the Macy Group that worked with the Frankfurt School was given, again, they all fled out of Germany again, just before Hitler came in. Met in New York, and Russell came over, Adorno and all the rest of them. And their job again was how to completely radically alter all that was held to be dear in the Americans' lives. That was independence, personal independence especially. And how they could wear them down bit by bit and again degrade the culture through all kinds of sexual immorality until standard fare of entertainment would be perversion. We have that. We've lived through that. It's here. And how they would gradually show that the state, through movies and all the rest, that the state was in charge. Now you don't get the lone cowboy riding in town cleaning it up. Now you get the SWAT teams and CSI, and you get the FBI and counter-terrorism squads and lots of faceless guys in black outfits like Star Wars. That's how they've changed it until everyone's obedient to the system and afraid of that system. And the Macy Group was given authority to exist in perpetuity and to change the culture of America by President Truman. This is in their own records, if you look them up. This is in their own records. We think, see, the average person, you're born into it. You'll see, well, why would you have and I realized this when I was only 7, because I used to listen to the Moscow radio, and they did a Department of Culture that would come out and announce itself, the Department of Culture. Then I looked into Britain and it said British Department of Culture. Canada, Canadian Department of Culture. I thought, why would your government have a Department of Culture if you, people, collectively are the culture? It was set up to change the culture. And the Department of Culture decides what you're going to see on television and how they're going to grade you through it. The Department of Culture is where you get all your political correctness from. They hire authors by the thousands. I think every author in Canada gets a grant from the Department of Culture. Now, the only way you can get the grant, and I've seen the forms for it here, even music as well, it says you must aim to radically alter the culture in order to qualify for this government grant. Then they give you a list of things either to sing about, or if you're a novelist, to write about and insert in your writings. Or if you're a cartoonist, in the cartoons. That's why you got cartoons complaining that the older folk destroyed society by consuming too much. They're all getting paid to do that by your governments. Getting back to political correctness, this is what comes into it. Critical theory is the theory that the Frankfurt School came out with for political correctness. How do we train the public? And what it means is you must institutionalize the terms in society like global warming, carbon taxes, anthropogenic global warming especially, stuff like that. And also the things that you don't want them to talk about. And it's so simple, critical theory. It means everything that is anti your agenda, you must attack it and criticize it. That's all it means. But that's also going all the way up now to different laws, so that you can't speak about certain people. I'm talking about individuals. Because they'll jump on a bandwagon and hide behind something, a good screen or something, and you can't go any further with them. We've got to go to the individuals and get their family histories, because you'll find that they're tied together, intermarried so tightly. I'm talking about these rich multi-trillionaires here. And literally, they've got relatives across the planet doing the same darn thing. And wherever they go, wherever they target, they bring the same system in of IMF for the United Nations, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements, which is to be the big bank that Quigley talks about. They talked about this as early as 1920. They would do that. And we're living through that phase now. So, to be honest with you, as I say, money makes their world go around. They rule the money system and the finances, and now they pretty well own most of the resources now. That was another big part of their target, own all the resources of the world. Cecil Rhodes talked about that too. We've got to start taking back power and figure out how we're going to do it and what kind of system you're going to end up with as well. And even then, there's going to be factions starting fighting each other over what kind of system you bring in. You're not going to please everybody, but the thing is, until we all realize that we are being murdered, we're being set up to be starved to death as well. And never mind all inoculations and more in the new inoculations they want you all to have annually all through your life now. Until we realize that and start getting moving and stop being so complacent and watching entertainment. Entertainment is the worst thing you can watch. You're being indoctrinated without even knowing it. So you've got to start reading serious stuff, because if you care about the people around you, if you care about your history, your as I say, all the people that went before you to make you, that's enough to stand up and do something about, because otherwise we're all going to be vanquished and will disappear into history, and until the names are all gone, the people are gone, the countries are all gone. The heritages are all gone. That's what they've actually said, that's what they want. Until there's no remnant left, a trace of what was before. John Dewey said it when he came from the Frankfurt School, to set up the educational systems for the West. He said eventually a generation will be born where they're taught no history of a race, a people, a country, or conflicts, or anything else. He says they'll know exactly what we want them to know, and that's almost here today.
Well, somebody asked me just yesterday why I do what I do, because, you know, as you've said yourself, it's not a job, it's not a hobby, it's something that needs to be done. And I said simply that, well, I've got a son, I've got a granddaughter, and I care about them, and that's it. You know, I mean, if I don't do something, they're not going to be able to, or they won't be here at all.